And a good day to you, Explorer Nation. John Lynskey, your ambassador for alumni affairs, here with season 5, episode 13. And it's a part 3, Uncharted Waters, with Hall of Fame linebacker and true explorer Mike Whittington from the class of 1976. Mike, here we go. Part 3 of one of the most intriguing and interesting podcasts we've ever done, particularly in the sports realm. And so thank you for agreeing to do this again and finish things up today. And I'm really excited about what we're going to talk about today. So, Mike, we left off part 2 yesterday. You're with the Giants, played 4 years. It looks like you're going to be the starting right inside linebacker, but then the business end of football rears its ugly head. And so tell us what happened, Mike, and your next step.
So if you go back to 1983, it was the first year in the USFL, and I had finished my season, or was just about to finish up my season with the New York Giants, 1983, my 4th season. And my contract was up, so I was technically a free agent. So, which meant I needed to re-sign with the Giants, or I had the option of going to the USFL. I had no intentions on playing in the USFL, but as my contract negotiations were going on with the Giants during the last couple of weeks of the season, basically what happened was, and this is the way it happened back in the day, if you weren't one of the top players on the team, I'd say the top 5 or 6 players, our general manager would walk up to you, hand you a contract, and walk away.
Yeah.
And just the way it was. And most cases you didn't have much leverage.
Yeah.
So my second or third attempt of him giving me a contract, and he went up a little bit each time, was a 2-year contract. I took this one contract, and I was so disgusted. He walked away. I ripped it up and threw it in the garbage. And the only witness I thought was Rob Carpenter, who was a friend of mine, who was a running back.
Yeah.
He got this look on his face like, oh boy. Well, I found out that George Young saw me do that. So within an hour, I was called into Bill Parcells' office, and he said, listen, Mike, you need to get an agent. Step out of this negotiation. Let somebody else. I said, Coach, you're right. I said, who's your agent? He said, what do you mean? I said, well, I figured you probably have a pretty good agent. And so he told me who he was. He said his name is Robert Fraley. He's out of Orlando. I said, perfect. Florida guy. I didn't know who Robert Fraley was. I said, write down his phone number. So he wrote his number down. I went into the locker room on our little pay phone back in the day. I called Robert Fraley and had a 10-minute conversation. Went back into Coach Parcells' office and slid that piece of paper at him. And I said, this is my agent. And I wasn't trying to be smart. I just said, listen, hey, you're right. I acknowledged. And I don't know, maybe there was a conflict of interest. Maybe there wasn't back then. I just figured he had a good agent. And so I started meeting with Robert on the phone, and the year ended with the Giants. And I went home, and I went home to Miami, and I came up to Orlando and sat with Robert a few times, and we ironed some things out. And he said, listen, Mike, I have a good contact with the Memphis Showboats in the USFL. Let's get your rights traded in the USFL, because your rights were territorial where you played college. So my rights were with the Chicago Blitz because of my Notre Dame.
Gotcha. Okay.
Years. So they traded for me. They traded 2 Canadian players for my rights. So I got my rights to Memphis. And really, we were going through this just to use Memphis and USFL as a bargaining hedge. And it worked because my salary started to creep up and the offers were getting better and better. And it came down to the money was the same. USFL, NFL, 2-year contract. The difference was the USFL was 100% guaranteed, skill and injury.
Nice.
So
Okay.
I had this on my plate, and the whole time I'm talking to Robert. Robert's talking to George Young. Robert Fraley, my agent, is talking to Bill Parcells, and they're trying to make it work. And Parcells told Robert for me to call him before I made a final decision. So I called up my last conversation with Coach Parcells. We talked about me coming back and signing and being, the incumbent. I mean, not the incumbent, but the future. That's how they were negotiating with me as the next starting inside linebacker. And I said, well, I want to come back. I said, just fix this one part. And they wanted to defer out my signing bonus. And I said, just give me my signing bonus up front. And he says, listen, I'm going to go to George Young. I think I can get that done.
Okay.
So he calls me back same day, very upset, and said, listen, Mike, do what you need to do. George Young won't budge. He said, but I'll tell you this, next job I get, I'm going to be the general manager, and this will never happen again. I said, I appreciate you going to battle for me. I hung up the phone. I talked to people about, and I thought about what I should do, and I was really torn. But the bottom line was, from what I was told, and I think Mark Rogers, who became an agent, and actually I got him a job. I helped him get, a job with Robert Fraley when he went into the representation side of the business.
Mm-hmm.
He told me, and I don't know if I guess this is true, that my contract with the Memphis Showboats made me the highest paid linebacker in the USFL.
Nice.
So, but anyway, the money was good. It was guaranteed. And I couldn't turn it down. I could have gone back to the Giants and got hurt, got waived, and only made, a few thousand. It was a big, big difference.
Sure.
And this money kind of gave me and my wife and the future family a safety net. And so I jumped. I mean, the next day I was in Memphis. That weekend I was playing against the Jersey Generals in Giant Stadium.
Wow.
And I was in the visiting locker room. It was really weird. I remember I come out of my Memphis Showboats uniform, and I'm playing against the New Jersey Generals and Herschel Walker and Doug Flutie and Brian Sipe. And I hardly even knew all my teammates' names. And I'm coming out the tunnel, and there's Jim Burt, who was a teammate of mine with the Giants. And he's just looking at me like, what are you doing? He was in shock. And I said, listen, Jim, the money is just too good. He goes, but you were my, me and you and Joe McLaughlin and Harry Carson, we were the three inside guys. He was really upset.
Yeah.
And, which, told me a lot. But, I went with it, and, so I started my 2-year contract with the Memphis Showboats.
Mike, what was there were some very big names in the USFL, which we'll discuss one of your teammates in a second. What did you notice in the difference in talent level between the USFL and the NFL?
Well, defensively, New York Giant defense was superior than any defense in the USFL. We had Lawrence Taylor and Leonard Marshall. I mean, we had Harry Carson, great players.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you this, that most of the first string or starting lineups in the USFL were very strong. Could have competed against most NFL teams. Now, when you got down to the second team, there was a big drop off. And that's because they spent money. The USFL ownership spent money for guys that were going to be on the field all the time.
Okay.
Guys that weren't going to be on the field unless there was an injury, they were still paying $15,000-$20,000 a year too.
Okay.
But the Steve Youngs, the Reggie Whites, the Doug Flutys and Herschel Walkers, those guys who were paying big more money than the NFL were paying guys. Top players on the New York Giants back when I was in my would have been my fifth year, were making $300,000.
Yeah, a lot of money.
Most of them were making $50,000-$60,000 is
Yeah.
what they were making. And USFL helped the salary gap shoot up. So that's what competition does. In the business market, competition creates. You find out how much what you should be worth when there's good competition. So there were some great backs in the USFL, some great quarterbacks. I mean, one of my first games was going out to LA and playing against Los Angeles Express against Steve Young. And that was what they called him, the $10 million man or something that in the USFL. So I think, what I did see, which was pretty rewarding, was that there were a lot of guys going through 4 years with the Giants, I went through 4 training camps. So I literally saw hundreds of players coming through. Every year they would bring not just, the draft choice, they'd sign 30, 40 guys. In the course of 6 weeks of training camp, you might see 60, 70 guys coming through camp. They cut 3, bring in 2, cut 4, bring in 2. It was just constant.
Okay.
A lot of those guys ended up in the USFL. So, and a lot of those guys were pretty good players. So I got to see a lot of guys get opportunities in the USFL, and then parlay those, when the USFL went under, parlay that into an NFL career, which was a good thing.
Mike, as I recall about the USFL, it was very similar between the ABA and the NBA in basketball, where the ABA might have they had superstars like Julius Erving and Dr. J, people like that. And then maybe the bench level wasn't the same, but it did increase, the bidding war from league to league, exactly what you went through. It's, as you say, it's great for competition, and it changed the game, no question about it. And so that's very interesting to hear about, and a name that everybody's going to recognize, Reggie White. So you had, the unbelievable opportunity and privilege to play with Lawrence Taylor and then Reggie White. Talk about Reggie White, Mike.
Yeah, the amazing thing you see about Reggie White when he walks into a room was just his size. He was just massive, and he was just the sweetest, nicest guy off the field that there could be. But he was huge, and I got to experience Reggie, as a friend, as a teammate, somebody in the locker room. Just a great guy, always smiling, always happy, but very young. So he was right out of college when I got to know him. So he was very young, somewhat naive, rightfully so. Hadn't had a lot of experience out on his own. But to watch him play, it was amazing. He just was the fastest, quickest, large human being I'd ever seen. I saw him make a play against Joe Cribbs in Birmingham that I ran it over and over on I just kept asking the coach, rerun that. And I said, were we seeing what we're seeing? He literally ran Joe Cribbs down the sidelines when Joe Cribbs was ahead of him. And I knew when I saw that play that, wow, this guy stays healthy. He's going to have one heck of a career. It was
right about that.
Yeah, and he did. And he was a great guy. Unfortunately, he was afflicted with, I believe it was sleep apnea or some they try and do their best to take care of players after their career, but a lot of guys slip through uh, the fingers in the system and don't get diagnosed or get improperly diagnosed. And I don't know exactly what happened, but it was sad. It was very sad because he's a human being that made this place better. He made the world better. He made everybody he came in contact with he just made them feel good about themselves, and he was just a great human being.
God bless him. You're right. He left an impact. So, Mike, and again, we haven't talked about this. After season 2 with the Showboats, what happens next?
So I actually did not finish my second season. I got towards the end of the season, and I had a lingering neck issue,
Okay.
and I was getting treatment, seeing doctors, and I was playing. Last few games I played towards the end of the season, I had zero contact in between games,
Okay.
and really stayed off the field practice wise because not only couldn't I not have contact, I couldn't take a chance because it's just every time I hit something, I had a stinger. As a football player, you have stingers in your career, and what a stinger means is you hit with your head, your neck gets wrenched a little bit, pinches a nerve, and it goes down the extremities of one of your arms into your fingers. And it burns, and within a few minutes it goes away. Well, I got a stinger during that second season that just never went away. So I had tingling and burning down by my right arm for at least half the season. And towards the end, I was in so much pain I just couldn't practice at all. But I was playing in the games. And it became a time where I just said, I looked at a picture of myself, and my whole right side was totally atrophied.
Oh,
And
geez.
I said, this isn't safe. And we made a determination to stop playing. And so I missed the last couple of games.
Okay.
And then after the season, I tried to decide what I should do. And I went and saw 3 or 4 spine guys, neurosurgeons, had a myelogram done at the University of Florida in the Shands Hospital. A myelogram is it's one of the old MRIs that are done with a oil-based dye. They put you on a inverted, and the damage was that I had between my 5, 6, 7. I had damage, spur into nerves, and the spine surgeon at the Shands Hospital said, I can operate on you, but I'll only give you about a 50-50 chance of any relief. And then the other 3 spine guys said, listen, you played 6 years. Most guys don't play 2 or 3 years. Hold off. Don't go back and just see how it heals on its own. So I decided at that point, to retire and just let it heal on its own. And I'd have to say maybe some people say it was a hard decision to walk away from football, but I was in so much pain. I didn't realize what an impact giving up sport that I had played since 7th grade was going to be at the time I made that decision. But as the symptoms went away and I started to feel a little better within 6, 7 months, I started thinking, maybe I should go back and play. And but I knew what I had gone through, and we were having our first child, and I thought maybe it was just time to move on, to the next chapter, whatever that was going to be. So that's what that was the decision I made.
Mike, that interesting point here. You're in your late 20s at this point, and people, athletes, they have such a short-lived career. I mean, the NFL does stand for not for long. And so now what does a person do? Artists, writers, musicians, anybody can continue their career for decades and decades. Now it's time for the next chapter. And before we get to the next chapter, the damage done to your body. You watched the game today. The way the game was played, everything with your head, with your head, with your head. The head was a battering ram. The head was everything. Talk about the changes to the game and the safety factors that are involved, because it is a different game now.
Well, I think it's safer.
Yeah.
Well, think about that Super Bowl, not one kickoff return.
Yeah.
So in that regard, a lot of concussions that I received were on kickoffs. So that alone has made the game safer. But you can't take the head out of the game, unless you took the helmets off, and then it would be rugby. So This is the game that people love, and I'm guessing, I'm being told, it's the most popular sport in the country. So you can't change the game so much that it's going to lose what people love, and that's contact is part of that love. They're doing a lot, but they can't do enough, because in the end, a lot of the employees, meaning the players, down the road are suffering because of what they went through while they were playing this game. And the only time will tell if they've done enough. Maybe there'll be less people ex-players with issues down the road than there are now. I'm just seeing, from my era, there's a lot of guys that are dying with CTE, dying with dementia, dying with diminished skills, dying with anxiety. And, can you attribute that to just natural causes or to football? Well, it's a fine line.
Mm-hmm.
But what they're finding now is that even though they weren't diagnosed, and you can't diagnose CTE until it's post-mortem.
Mm-hmm.
But what they're finding is, players, ex-players that are having issues, that are dying, almost all of them have CTE.
Yeah.
So I don't think you escape this game, especially if you play as long as, I did, and others that played 6 years professionally, because they start early, you got to start early. The potential, the probability that you have CTE is going to be very high, and how does that translate into what your issues are later in life? So even before CTE, players were having problems with arthritis and knees and hips and joints and shoulders. So that's a problem too.
It is. Any regrets, Mike?
No, I mean the knowledge that I had at the time I was making decisions, whether I was playing, not playing, how I played, how long I played, the way I played. I made those decisions based on the knowledge I had at the time. Now I have a lot more knowledge now, and what I've done, what I do different things. We all would do things differently had we if we knew what we knew now back then.
Yeah.
Of course, it's just but you're not gifted with that.
No.
But we are gifted with what we know now.
There you go. There you go. So, Mike, classic, and every athlete goes through this at some point or another. The cheering stops, and it's time to move on to the next chapter. How did being an athlete, a teammate, prepare you for your next career? You became a firefighter, which I find very interesting. Talk about that, Mike.
Well, I didn't realize at the time what it prepared me for, because once you start playing, you think, hey, I'm going to play. You don't think about your life after football.
Sure.
I was in the moment. I was married, played football, and that was that was my moment. When my wife got pregnant with our first son, it changed me a little bit as to what the future should be or start to look like. So when it was done, when football was over for me, I really didn't know what I was going to do. Should I go back to school? Should I go into coaching? I didn't know. So I took some time. I had to get my neck feeling better. My son was going to be born within a few months, so we were going through that, getting ready for that. Living in Miami, and really not doing anything. Just didn't know what to do. Robert Fraley, my agent, and I were in contact, and he's saying, "Listen, there's." I have a lot. He had a lot of head football coaches as his clients, several. He said, "Listen, I can make a couple phone calls and have you a job in the NFL tomorrow." So I thought about that, and I think we had some discussions about that at home, and I remembered all I could think about at the time was, if I go to work with the New York Giants or even the Miami Hurricanes, because Coach Schnellenberger was Robert Fraley's client, and there was phone calls made there because Robert knew I was in Miami, so he thought maybe that would be an easy transition for me. And I just knew what an entry-level college professional coach lifestyle was. It was close. It was so close because I just finished playing, and I saw the family life that was non-existent for those coaches. And that wasn't going to be me. What was going to be me was my initial desire in life was to be a husband and a father. And football coach, whether it be college or professional, did not line up in my eyes based on the lifestyle and the hours of commitment. I wanted to commit myself to my family life. So I wanted to find a job that would be conducive for that. So I had to turn down that opportunity. And once you turn down that opportunity, that window goes away. Within a few years, that window's gone, which, I didn't understand it at the time, but I just knew that wasn't going to be the direction I wanted to go in. Okay. So I started talking to people. Should I go back to school, get my MBA? Should I go to law school but I don't, academically, I wasn't the best, academically, I was not real strong. I knew I could make it work if I really worked at it hard. But during my conversations with friends and family and what I should do, a good friend of mine from Columbus, Ron Colley.
Oh yeah, great guy.
For many, many years. He suggested, well, I'm a firefighter and I love what I do. This is what we do. This is what I do. Why don't you go to fire college and get certified as a firefighter, and you'll get a taste of it. So I thought about it. I talked to the wife about it and said, this might be good for me to give me, it's a physical job. My neck's feeling a little better. My nerves have calmed down on my neck. I'm in great shape. I mean, heck, I was going to be starting linebacker in the NFL potentially. If I could physically do this.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I went to fire college in Broward County and became certified, and I really enjoyed it. It was very much like, it was the whole package of working with your hands, helping people, working with your mind, figuring things out and reacting, getting training. And so I just continued on that path. I went and got my EMT certification. I started applying to fire services companies in the Dade County area, Broward County area. Ended up getting hired by the city of Miami and started working as a City Miami firefighter. I really liked the job. It was very fulfilling. And I got to work with my hands. I got to go out on exciting calls and build camaraderie amongst other firefighters. And I figured at that point, after a few years, I think this could be my career. And I was happy. I was making friends and became certified as a driver engineer. Got my certifications in hazmat. I was on the hazardous materials team, special unit response teams. So I was on the path of a successful City of Miami firefighter.
Mike, you talked about a couple things, being part of a team, being part of a unit, facing situations that are different, that evolve. And it sounds very much like a football game in some ways. And the adrenaline rush, I'm sure at times, it was, when you're going into a situation, it's not much different, I imagine, than running down, covering a kickoff. You're running towards the danger, so to speak, instead of away from it. Does that make sense?
It totally makes sense. We're sitting in the fire. We're in our fire station. The bell goes off, and in a matter of seconds, you're responding. You get a little bit of information, and you get off the truck, and you're assessing whether it's fire, car fire, person down, shooting, stabbing, overdose, pregnancy, whatever the difficulty was, difficulty breathing. You respond and you have a little bit of information. Then you start, your training kicks in, you're sizing up the scene. What do you need? What equipment do you need? What is the situation and how are you going to remedy it? And you're depending on your other firefighters. You do this, I'll do that. And it just starts, your training kicks in, and it's running down on a kickoff is about as exciting a thing as far as sports, thrilling things you could ever want to do. But jumping on the back of a truck or jumping in a truck or driving the truck or being charge of the crew, going to a situation was, that was the emotions that went along with that were just, I got to play professional football. I got to be a professional firefighter. That alone, those two things alone. I see little kids dressed up as firefighters. I see little kids dressed up as football players. And I think, I got to do both of those things. And that's pretty special to be able to have those memories. And, one of my stations was right near the port of Miami. And I can remember going to the port of Miami on numerous times where people were coming off cruise ships and having heart attacks and having difficulty breathing and just fainting and, getting there and trying to remedy the situation. These people are coming off some of the, fun week off of a cruise, and they're in this situation. How are you going to make that situation better for those people? That was pretty exciting, and it was very fulfilling for me.
I would think. So you did that for what, about 6 years, correct?
5 years.
5 years. And so then another chapter, time to get out of Miami. You've got a family. Miami is Miami. We all know that. And so talk about the decision to leave, that career, move north, raise a family, and become, basically a small business owner.
Yeah, that was a tough one, John. But I had made some decisions in my life all the way from going to Columbus versus Gables, going to Notre Dame versus Auburn. And I'm moving to the Space Coast, and I'm leaving Miami and at a dream job. And we had a beautiful house in Kendall by Killian High School. We did have a idyllic life, but things were going on in Miami that, my wife and I started talking about. We had 2 children at the time. they were young, preschool, and home invasions. I think the thing that really kicked it in was they were starting to follow uh, wives and whoever back from Publix into their garage and accosting them.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
Right down the street from our house.
Yeah.
So at the time that was going on, we were talking about, what can we do to move to a better environment? And I said, well, let's just, I'll commute. I work every third day. We can move up to Palm Beach County, Martin County, get away from this, and I'll commute. And it was decided that no, let's have a reason. If we're going to leave this idyllic life, let's have a reason. So at the same time this is going on, I'm going to some NFL Players Association conventions, meetings, and I'm interfacing with some of my old teammates. So one of the teammates was Lyle Blackwood. I met at a convention. I met up with him at a convention. He was working for a company called Interstate Batteries, corporate, out of Dallas, Texas. And he's talking about these distributorships that, he's trying to recruit new distributors for territories that were underperforming, or they were getting split up, or just for sale. So, I took his information and, I just knew it was there. And he started contacting me at home during this exact time this was happening. So one came up, Dade County came available. And I said, listen, Lyle, if one comes up and it's available north of West Palm Beach, you call me back. So within a year, he calls me back and said, hey, there's a distributorship opening up in Melbourne, Florida. I said, all right, well, I've been to Melbourne once or twice. And as a matter of fact, the Memphis Showboats training camp or winter training camp was in Melbourne at Florida Tech. So I had a little bit of knowledge about Melbourne. So I came up at that time he was offering me this distributorship. I came up and looked around, and I spent a few days up here, and I went back home and I said to my wife, this area is a lot like Miami was when we were growing up. Mm-hmm. And I think it would be a really nice place to raise the kids. And maybe it took a little bit of convincing. We were going to have to dive into that nest egg and to buy this distributorship. And it was an interstate battery distributorship, which meant you basically set up and you sold batteries wholesale. You had a territory, so you had to have, infrastructure, employees, the whole route. I had no experience in this, but after discussing it with my wife, she backed me, and we decided to make this big move. And our kids, they were young, so they could adapt. But, I didn't know anybody up here. I didn't know anything about the business, had a week of training. But we bought the distributorship, and I got a warehouse. I rented a warehouse, bought a van, bought a truck, and had one employee, and a bunch of firemen came up and helped me build an office in the warehouse over the weekend. And I had a cell phone back in the day that you could forward there. I mean, I went to work, and I guess my motivation was that I got into an area that I felt really comfortable about raising my family, and I just knew that I wasn't gonna not make this successful. I was gonna make it successful. I was gonna make it work. I had some naysayers. Some of my buddies that were in the business, some of them in the automotive business, said, "Listen, Mike, you'll never work harder in your whole life when you get into the battery business." And they were right. I mean, it was hard work. I mean, I was having hours of 4:00 morning coming into the office and getting the work done, and many, many years of that. But I was, at some point in my career, I was able to hire enough people, grow the business to the point where, during my kids' junior high school, and all their athletics and sports and extracurriculars, I was very involved in, and my wife was involved. So she was not tied to the business like I was. She could come and go. She was a tremendous help, especially with the paperwork and the billing and all the things that go on with, business. She was a tremendous help, but I gave her the leeway that she could come and go, so she can be involved on a daily basis with our kids in schools and all their events. So eventually the business grew enough that I could get away too and be part of that too, and get into help, with coaching in their Little League baseball and their high school football. And so it turned out to be a really good thing. It was not easy though, by any means.
But Mike, neither was making the New York Giants as an unsigned free agent, So nothing is a substitute for hard work, right? It doesn't guarantee success, but without it, you have no chance. And I think that's a prime example. And maybe it does correlate back to what was instilled in all of us, all the way back to Columbus. You work hard, you work with people, you set a goal, and you obtain it, you achieve it.
Yeah, I mean, it did start. It starts at the home. You watch your parents work and their work ethic, and then when you go to school, especially when I went to Columbus, and it was reinforced, the work ethic, and working through, not struggles, but just discipline.
Yeah.
And setting goals and meeting expectations and having, I think back, one of your with Carter Burris talking about that. You're talking about the oak tree and the perpetual Carter Burris oak. Everybody can relate to that field, that oak tree, the grass. Him licking the blades of grass because of water. I mean, I never licked the blades of grass, but I can remember going for that water and the cups. But if you weren't one of the first ones there, you were drinking dirt.
Yeah.
That was hard.
Yes.
Was
yeah.
And to go back and say, I'm going to get up again at 6 a.m. and be here for my 2-a-days. And we went out for lunch. We rested a little bit, and then we were back at it. And that was hard. So it was set a tone for, if you want to be successful, the path to success is hard work and overcoming adversity, and maybe taking one path and it's not leading you to the right direction, and just being man up or mature enough to know, I'm going to try another path. I'm going to find a way to make that one work.
Mike, we've had some wonderful conversations, and you've covered so much ground, but let's wrap up by going back to where it all began. And I like to ask people what, being Marist means to them. And you told a great story the other day about what Columbus can do for people, and the breaks and the care that comes from that school. So why don't you wrap us up with that great story about what Brother Kevin did for you? It was a game changer.
Yeah, well, since I've been listening to your podcast, I've learned a little bit more about Marist and what Marist means. I didn't realize it came from Mary. I just knew that what Marist to me was the Marist brothers and their commitment to education and religion being in the same classroom. So even though you're maybe learning, math, you're still, Jesus Christ is in that room with you. He's on the wall. He's in the room. He's present, because he's present through your teachers, your Marist brothers, and it's glowing from them, and it's a presence. And the presence comes out when things happen where you need a hand. You need a hand up. And, I didn't realize, I knew I now know what that Marist commitment to the student body at Columbus was. I can relate to a situation that happened to me second semester junior year. I was on the top. I was getting recruited by everybody. Everybody's telling me I'm just the greatest, and and it's getting to my head, and I'm floating through school, and I was a decent student, and if I had a good teacher, a special teacher that took a special interest in me, and I wanted to work for them, I would do fine. But if I had a teacher that didn't care about whether I learned it or not, I had a tendency to just zone out and not just skate through. And but that's life is like you have to adapt. Whether the teacher shows an interest in you or not, you have to be mature enough to learn the material, however it is delivered. I didn't understand that, and it came back to hurt me, because I got my report card after my junior year, and I had A's and B's and everything except for algebra 2. I got to my algebra 2 grade, and it's an F.
Mm.
And whoa, boy, to bringing that into my dad, and what are we going to do now? I'm not going to pass. Am I going to transfer back to Gables? Columbus didn't at the time have summer school.
Yeah.
So I had very limited options. So I don't know if my dad went with me or not, but one way or another, I went in to see Brother Kevin, because he was the head of the math department at the time. So Brother Kevin made me a deal, and he said, listen, this is the way we're going to deal with this. And he says, I'm going to help find you a tutor, and you go to this tutor on your own. And when you're ready, you come back and you're going to take my final exam. And I said, hey, that's fair enough. I appreciate the offer, the opportunity and the offer. I want to stay here at Columbus. I don't think Columbus wanted to lose me, but I think they were willing to if I wasn't willing to put in the work.
Yeah.
So I went to this tutor all summer, and the tutor said, I think you're ready. And he was a Miami-Dade junior college student, lived out in West Miami somewhere. And I just remember sitting at his dining room table and him just drilling it into me. And, and that's the way I learned. I needed, in certain subjects, I needed that one-on-one special interest, and he gave it to me. So I came back and I said, Brother Kevin, I'm ready. He had a test ready for me, and I knew it wasn't going to be easy. It's probably harder than the test that I didn't do well on.
Okay.
So I took the test, and I got a B-, and that was my grade for the semester. And I'll never forget that.
That is a game changer, and that's what we do. And it started with the Marist brothers, and it continues to this day. And Mike, I have to tell you, I've been doing these podcasts for a long time, been at Columbus for a long time, all that. This one was special because this one was personal, because as I said at the very beginning, you're who I wanted to be. And you have set the bar in so many ways. People ask all the time, the greatest linebackers at Columbus. We've had great linebackers, obviously, but you set the bar. You and Matt Britton and Lane Jackson and Jeff Sawyer and Juan Sendoy and Joey DiBernardo, Tommy Heffernan, I can keep going. But you're always the one that people point to as where it all began, you and Mike Flynn. And so thank you for the impact you had on me without knowing it, and it's been passed down. And thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing all this great information. It's been fascinating. And I truly have enjoyed it. So thank you very much, Mike.
Hey, I've enjoyed it also, John. And there's somebody at Columbus right now that looks up to somebody that came before them. And there's somebody in 7th and 8th grade that's looking up to somebody that's at Columbus right now.
Yeah.
And it's just going to keep going. And that's what's so great about Columbus, that it's producing these, and there's great role models, whether they're their students, their administrators, coaches, staff. I mean, even the lunch lady at Columbus made an impression on me, Mrs. Thomas.
Mrs. Thomas, yeah.
You know, that's a lunch lady.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a great institution, and I was just fortunate to have the opportunity to go there and get through that school, and it made a difference. It made a huge difference in my life.
And I think you've made a difference to so many people. So thank you once again, Mike. It's been an honor and a pleasure and a lot of fun. So Explore Nation, I hope you've enjoyed all 3 of these episodes with Hall of Famer Mike Whittington, and it's something we're very proud of. And so until next time, buenos tiempos and adelante. Thank you, Mike.
Thanks, John.